I'm going to try to make this a little bit interactive. We do want you to talk a little bit, but I've also got a hell of a lot of stuff to cover. And in terms of our agenda, hopefully again you can see this on the screens around you. I want to talk a little bit about the key differences as we see it between an LXP, what does that mean, and an LMS. So learning experience platform, LXP, LMS, learning management system. Try and talk about sort of grey areas in between. Get a sense of how much experience, learning experience, is there really in the average LXP? And we've got some data that we'll share around that. We're going to go through the latest trends in some of the platform space. I won't dwell on that, we talk about that quite a lot. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the components on your shopping list. And you're going to do a little bit of conversation around that yourselves. And finally, we're going to decide, how do you decide yourselves what is the right solution for you? Okay, so we're going to cover a few things like that. Before I start, I'd like to know a little bit more about you in the room. Could you put your hand up if you're sat next to somebody that you know? Okay, cool. Could you put your hand up if you are sat next to somebody that you work with? Okay. Now, first rule of Conference Club is that you do not sit next to somebody that you already know. Okay, coming here to network, so introduce yourself to the person that you do not know, just to make a new friend. It is important. So I'm going to give you 2 seconds just to say hello. Okay, so you managed to meet some new friends. Do exchange business cards. It is really important that you network. And so remember, the rule of Conference Club is you do sit next to somebody different, not to the people that you came in the room with. The other thing I want to know, and maybe we'll do this by getting you to make sure that you are still awake, and actually it's reassuring to hear that noise because that means you are awake. I'd like everybody to stand up without hurting themselves or anybody else in their vicinity. This is probably a very dangerous thing. And I'm just going to ask you some really simple questions. You're not going to be stood very long, but it just gives us a sense of the experience around learning technology in the room. Okay, so if you've never been involved with learning technology before, could you sit down? Okay. If you've been involved with learning technology for up to a year, could you sit down? Okay, cool. Now, those people who still stood up, help the people who have sat down. They would need your support, right? That's about networking. Those people who've been involved in learning technologies for maybe 2 years could sit down. Wow, okay. So we've got a very experienced group. 3 years, you could sit down. Okay? That's a long time, right? 5 years. Okay? Right, so you've got some old hands here. Some people with grey hair, some people with younger people without grey hair. Some supplied out of a bottle. I haven't done that yet. Maybe I should. If you've been involved in technology for 7 years, sit down. Okay. Those people who have been involved in learning technologies for 10 years, crikey. Okay. So all the people who are left standing get looked at by everybody else on the table and around them, because these are the people who really know what's been going on, right? And they've either made it a great success or they've made a lot of mistakes along the way, which is even more important, right? So rest of you guys, we could keep going on, but I'll let you sit down. But hopefully that was the thing. But it's important for you to also understand who is around to help you, right? This is not something you do on your own. And as much as I can provide you with advice, it's the community that you work with which will provide you with the greatest insight. And that's what we rely on in terms of what we do at Fosway. So just hands up, who's heard of Fosway before? Okay, hands up if you haven't heard of Fosway. Where have you been? Okay, so again, I won't dwell in too long about what we do, but basically we are an industry analyst. We provide advisory support to organizations in terms of what they choose. We do advisory support for providers to help them try and understand what they should be doing. And we also look at the marketplace and we do more broader research, okay? So we try and sort of join the dots together between what sort of works, what sometimes works, what really works, and what's the difference between the solutions, okay? And that's what I'm going to try and share with you today. Now, just a quick question. Again, you can do this on the hands up. We were going to try and use Klaxoon. Unfortunately, we couldn't. Could you put your hands up if you think that your learning technology is fit for the modern workforce? Okay, so all those who agree that their technology is fit for the modern workforce, could you put a bold yes? Okay. Okay, that's a little. Maybe do it the other way around. Who thinks that their learning technology is not fit for the modern workforce? Okay, so they've got double hands. I like the double vote. Who didn't put their hand up? You can put your hand. Thank you. It's important. Right. Your results in this room, as a quick straw poll, are worse than we had when we did our survey of 1,000 respondents at the start of the year. Okay? only a third of people think that their learning technology is fit for the modern workforce. Now, partly the question is, for the rest of you, 50% who said no, why the hell did you buy it, or why the hell aren't you getting rid of it? That's a different question. But I tend to think even those 13% who don't know are probably no's, right? If you don't know, it's no. Otherwise, you would know, okay? That's my call on it, okay? And I'm up here. So it's really important just to get a sense of, actually, there is a little bit of a failure around learning tech in terms of our sense of how it's delivering for our people. So a different question. How many of you are looking for a learning experience platform to add into your learning ecosystem? So again, put your hands up. Not that you're a target for any salespeople in the room, but yeah, so there's a few people. Who's not looking? Nobody's not looking, okay. I know why. Who hasn't got one but is thinking about getting one? Okay, so few people. Right then. And those who are not looking, they're not really interested. Okay, that's fine. If anybody had put their hand out, they're probably in the wrong room. That's fine. So, this sense of sort of why people don't think they've got the right solutions or why they're struggling. And this is probably just a useful graph overall, just to get a sense of who's using what, okay? Now, basically, the colored parts of the lines show you proportionately how many people have that sort of platform. So if you look at the top one, learning management systems, about 90% of our respondents say they've got a learning management system, okay? If you come down to here, around learning experience platforms, we're down to about 30%. So if you think this is something that people are really interested in as a provider, then this is a massive opportunity, right? Because actually the marketplace is not saturated with learning experience platforms in terms of people who bought it. Now, the interesting thing about the colors is that shows you effectively who's happy with their system. So if I take away the people who don't have, or say that's not applicable, you get a sense from the green, all those people who are happy with their learning platforms. And in the red and the orange, or the orange and the red, all the people who think it's acceptable or not very good. Now, I tend to think that if you haven't bought something that is good, then it's bad, okay? Acceptable is not really good enough, and if I give you a meal that is acceptable, you probably won't come back to my restaurant. Okay? And I think the same is with our solutions and our sense about learning technology. Again, if you look at the difference, you are lucky if you get 50-50 chance of having something you think is good, which again is amazing. And then if you look around LXPs, again, that's sort of similar, right? So there's not too much difference. You've got 50-50 chance. And again, the probably big question is, oh, sorry about that. The big question is, why? Why does that happen? Okay, so if you've got an LXP, again, if you could put your hand up if you've already got a learning experience platform. Anybody? I can't see your hand. So I've got, not very bold. I've sort of got one I don't want to share. Could you put your hand up a bit more boldly, please? Just want to see who's got a learning experience platform. Got one person, two people, okay. Why did you want one? And I think if you come to this talk, I'll get a sense that actually maybe you're curious about what learning experience platforms are, you've started to research them. What I'd like you to do, just in your table for 5 minutes, is talk about why did you get an LXP? Why did you want one? And we'll just get you to talk a little bit for 5 minutes about, is that of interest to you, is it not? Why are you looking for one or not looking for one? And then we'll just come back and we'll just go through a few tables, and hopefully we'll have covered most of the answers before we do creeping graph. We'll not go through every table. We'll just choose you randomly. But I'm going to just say, start talking. We'll come back in 5 minutes just to get a sense of why are you looking for an LXP or not looking for an LXP. So what I want to do is just get some feedback from different tables around. So why are you looking for a learning experience platform or not looking for one? What is your context? What are you trying to achieve? So does anybody like to volunteer? Fantastic, gentlemen here. I don't know if we've got a mic we can send in that direction, hopefully not throw.
Where are we going?
There you go. Or you can just shout if you feel.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
You jump into the punchline, but yeah, go on then.
Okay. I've got a whole bit around that. Okay. So I will tell you, I've got a whole set of stuff that we've got variables, which is based on the data, not an opinion. So I will take you through that. So was anybody looking for an LXP and they've got one, and the reasons they were looking for one, or thinking about learning experience as being something that's important to them? Here we go. Lady and the gentleman, that'd be great.
I'm Gemma from Aviva. So we're having this conversation at work at the minute, and for me it's not about having a platform that you send people to, but it's how can you bring this into people's work and help them solve real problems in the moment. So having a destination feels like something that hasn't worked for years, and I don't know if having a new destination is going to help that.
Okay, so it's about actually creating the right touch points at the right time, for the right people, with the right materials or the right nudge.
Beautifully
Cool,
put.
perfect. So that's maybe part of the explanation of what an LXP might be. The gentleman here, sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Joost Basemans. I'm from Amsterdam. From company Remember, we create bespoke learning solutions. Cool. And for a client, we created an LXP, or at least it's called an LXP. And to our mind, or how do we approach it? It's that it has to be a good user experience, and learning management systems in many cases are built around managing learning content, and the learning experience is built around the learning experience. So if you take the approach from the optimum user experience, then I'd say if it's okay and it's a good user experience, you can call it platform a learning experience platform. So that's
perfect. And I think so. There's this combination in my head, right? From what the lady said from Aviva about actually it's about trying to create a more engaging cycle and interaction and hit the right touch points for individuals, but also based around the fact that most of our historical learning technologies have not been focused on the learning experience of the learner. They've been focused more on the learning management, which is the administration of the back end, right? Make sure the right people have got the right content, which doesn't necessarily always translate into a great learner experience. So there is a little bit of a conflict. And what's interesting from our data, and I've dropped my clicker, is that the thing that people say that would the most important features for improving their digital learning approach is all about learner engagement, right? That's the number one. And what they're finding is those current systems aren't driving the level of engagement or the right sort of relationship with their learners. And that's one of the drivers, one of the reasons people are looking for platforms. They're trying to bridge this thing between what is a dull, boring learning experience to something that's much more stimulating. Then the stuff around learning analytics, as you go down, you can see a sort of the focus that people want to improve. There's things down the bottom here around gamification, all not good to dwell on, but just that learning engagement is probably one of the key drivers, right? And that's what people are looking for. What engagement means is something that's completely different. I don't know we've necessarily got a complete definition around that. But one of the reasons I think also why people are looking for learning experience platforms is what they're finding is their solutions that they have at the moment are not helping people at the points where people need the most help. So if you look at our research, and again, this goes back to last year's survey that we did, people are looking to provide more support for learners when they're trying to apply their learning in the workplace after they've done their work. Now, I'm not sure how many of you provide that at the moment, but very few organizations provide that. Less than a third often provide learners with support in applying their learning. So we give you learning, good luck, get on with it, is what happens to 70% of people. Less than a third look at sustaining workplace in the workplace. So once you've learned something, you start to apply it, how are we making sure that you continuously improve? That is not coming through in what the practice is. And I think this is one of the gaps in what we see around the current systems. That's what people are looking to expand around. If you look at the number of people who measure progress, less than half do that. Less than 60% are failing to systematically drive mastery. So actually, the quality of your organization is how good your people are at doing stuff. Not what they know, it's what they do. So again, that's one of the weaknesses in the current platforms. They've looked at managing learning, not managing outcomes, and managing interactions. And that's one of the things that people are looking for in platforms. And finally, just multi-channel learning. How many people have really developed or delivered blended learning in their organization, if you could put your hand up? Okay? It should be easier than it is, and our systems aren't supporting us in doing that. And those are some of the reasons why. Now, to give a sort of clear definition about, so what is the difference between an NGLE and an LXP and the LMS, we've done a lot of analysis around it, and I think one of the things that you can think about is this characterization of what sort of learning have you been trying to deliver into your organization. Traditionally, we've come from solutions which focus primarily on formal learning delivery. Okay? It's about how do I get content to people? How do I get, whether that's online, whether it's face-to-face, I've had a formal delivery that I'm trying to expand and trying to deliver. And most of the systems have been focused on delivering cost efficiencies, on how can you do your existing formal training at scale at lower cost. The thing that we're now seem to be more interested in is this stuff over here. This whole sense of how do we support, like the lady said, around workplace learning? And how do we create more collaborative learning? Most of the roots of the platforms that come out in that learning management space have been focused on managing the formal stuff. So when we start to look at learning experience platforms and we look at our current systems, our current ecosystems, we invariably say, it's not really doing much for my workplace learning. Am I really doing coaching? Have I got performance support? What's being offered? And it's not usually there, because we haven't really asked that in the past. That's where those systems have come from. And this whole sense about creating collaborative learning has been missing as well. So you see a shift, and most of our data, when we look at this, starts to sort of show that as well. The other thing that we're also seeing is people starting to broaden out what they think about their delivery mechanisms around the key context for learning. And there are three contexts as I see it. One is around driving personal learning. This is about learning which is about engagement, it's about development, it's about the learning habit, because I want to increase my mastery, my expertise, just want to belong, I want to join in some of the conversations that people are having at work. And then you've got this operational performance. So the things that enable us to survive as a business now, 3 months, it's about new systems, new starters, it's about compliance, it's about new products, new workflows, it's about mergers and acquisitions, the things that are imperative for our organization that we have to deliver a program around quite often in order for the organization to survive. And latterly, you also have, so what's in it for me as an individual? Where's my career going, right? Now, the systems that we have when we talk about learning experience, they don't necessarily tick all of these boxes, right? So the boxes around personal learning, have we got learning experience platforms for that? Sort of, not very many. Have we got systems that can support bite-sized learning and social performance management, so feedback in the flow? Not really. Have we got solutions that can provide us with a career plan, which is engaging? Potentially, if we've got a talent management platform. But if you're looking at trying to say, so what is learning experience platform, potentially you've got a few different ones you're trying to put into place, because I'm not sure if one system can do all of this, especially if you think about the context of learning in the workflow, think about collaboration, and the formal stuff as well. So, one of the interesting things is when we think about experience, and you can download this and look at this, maybe you can't see this clearly enough, but we see different layers in solutions. Every solution will give you a learning experience, right? Even the LMS that you may not like in your environment at the moment will give you an experience. And it's the combinations of the touch points and all the other features that create that experience. So we've got some layers here. We've got the thing about the actual experience that you have. So is that about a formal learning portal? Is it a touch point is it a workplace portal? Is it a chatbot that appears in your Facebook at work? Is it about a nudge that you get on your phone? These are the touch points, right? And systems haven't necessarily thought about that. They've just thought, we have an LMS, you come. Learning management, that doesn't go away if you're trying to have a learning experience, because you want to know that the right courses are available to the right people. So the right language is available to the right person. They didn't have to choose it. So that becomes a layer. You've got people who still want to do training. So, my God, they want to come on a course. Yes. So they have that in here as well as the layer. So you've got the whole thing about training, having classrooms in the right places. That can be a part of it. You also got this whole data analytics, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment, but this whole sense of the business data, which is the important data that people understand about how they're performing. Do we have that in our learning management systems? No. Do we have it in any part of our learning ecosystem? Probably not. But that's the stuff that drives the motivation to think, actually, I need to learn that. So there's loads of elements in here about predictive analytics that actually the learning experience isn't just the top layer, it's all how all these layers hang together. And ultimately, having everything in one system, I think is highly unlikely. So you're trying to think, actually, if I'm trying to do a leadership program, what is the right combination? of elements from the top layer, and the next layer down, and so on. So you end up this like sort of matrix of needs, which is very contextual to the program. So if you want to do a product launch, what combination makes sense for your people? So again, the learning experience is potentially quite difficult to define as a system, because not only have you got to have features and functionalities, but you've also got context, which drives different behaviors. So it becomes really complex to try and stitch this together. It's not a simple answer of an LXP is only this, but I will try and distill that a little bit anyway. But the question is, where can you find all of this to some extent? And you can't. Yeah? It's not all in one system. And what the challenge is at the moment is, if you've got a pretty okay-ish or good LMS, for example, what do you need to add which enables you to deliver a better experience in a specific context? Is it about your field operations guys who don't get a chance to come into the classroom, but you need to create a better rapport with them and a relationship with learning? Is it about actually your millennials who are joining and they want a career development path from day one when they join? What are you doing to deliver that? So this is a multi-headed thing. You will not find in a learning experience which just delivers everything, because you actually contextualize the learning experience every time. So this is something that's really important that you sort of take away in a way. But what we'll go through is, so how much learning experience is there in an LXP? And what I'm going to say is, so we go through and we've looked at about 50 different providers. We've got about over 200 lines of RFP-style analysis, which says, this is the functionality. Tell us whether you're good at it, whether you think you're a market leader, are you poor at it. And we do that on a regular basis. We've been collecting this data about the last 5 years. We also do demos and things like that to get an idea. The things that we ask when we're profiling, just so you can get a sense where I'm going with this, is we look at what sort of learning can you enable as a platform. Okay, so can you do assessments? Can you do formal learning? Can you do workplace learning? Can you do collaboration? Can you do competencies? Can you do development planning? How good are you at doing extended enterprise? Because it's not about my internal people. What about learning asset management? How can I make sure that's optimized? Then we've got stuff which are around experience. There's 69 factors around that, around can I create a marketing campaign? Have I got design controls around a learning portal? Is it mobile? Is there a manager portal that enables them to give feedback? Is there analytics? So we capture that. There are relationship tools which enable you to use AI and nudge, right? So we profile that and we say, are you good? Do you have partial functionality, or are you market leader, or do you have none? Okay, so we've gone through that. And then there's stuff which is just about housekeeping, what sort of people, what organizations. So at a very rudimentary level, you can target the right content, the right people. Okay, so these are the factors. There's 230 lines. Okay, it's a bit like saying to 50 vendors, tell me what you do. Yeah, try and take out some of the legwork. Now, what we found was the difference between an LXP and an LMS is the green bits, they do stronger. Okay, now hopefully you can see this. And the red bits, they do potentially weaker. Okay, so this is like compared to the market average. LXPs don't do so much learning enablement as compared to an LMS, because most of the learning we're trying to deliver quite often is formal, in reality, as a learning team. The stuff that LXPs are weaker on tends to be stuff like assessment, which is a bit weird. Stuff around competencies, capabilities, development planning, stuff around formal learning. Okay, that makes sense. Stuff around content and asset video management. But where it's really strong is stuff which is around collaborative and social learning and workplace learning. Okay, so specifically, when you look at learning experience platforms, as we've gone through the analysis and said, okay, is your platform an LXP or an LMS? The difference is these accents at the moment in terms of what the market is actually providing. On the LMS side, some of the differences aren't too much, but sometimes they are quite stark. Don't do stuff around social collaborative, don't necessarily do stuff around workplace learning. So you can get a sense of that. Remember we had those 3 sectors, formal learning, workplace learning, collaborative. If your model is about shifting to workplace learning, and you think that actually you want more social collaboration, no wonder you are dissatisfied with your current platform, because it probably doesn't do that part of the equation. And what people are starting to do is saying, I need something else potentially to fill that gap. Does that at all make sense? No, not really. Yeah, okay, I've got a couple of nods, so I'll take that. Okay, cool. So just on the other sense, so the experience, what the experience actually is, right? Again, the things that the experience platforms focus on is maybe slightly better reporting analytics, slightly better experience administration, so being able to create the campaigns that support a program, for example. but also stuff around relationship tools. They'll give you the tools that enable you potentially to nudge people to do their learning more systematically. Okay. Now, in our presentation, I've got the details of what those things are. Stuff around mobile learning is also different. Now, you can see in certain instances, the differences in the percentages aren't that big. And again, that's one of the challenges, is if you have an LMS, quite often it does quite a lot of the functionality of LXP. And that's something else I'll come through and talk through. So, don't bother reading this. It's in the presentation. You'll have all the detail of what we mean by those categories. So all the things I said were green or red. All the detail is in here. So things like chatbots, etc. I'll leave you to have a look at that yourselves, but there's a lot of detail, so you get a sense of the questions and parameters we set. But overall, to come back to the gentleman's question about what is an LXP, it's either an element to do with learner engagement, right? Or it's a bit to do with the learning touch point. I'll talk touch point rather than portal. Or it's about being socially collaborative. And the challenge that you have is each provider will have a slightly different accent around, are they more social, are they more portal and touch point orientated, or are they more feature-led around engagement? So again, it's trying to sort of create this match between what you're trying to achieve as an outcome and what the features and functionality is. And those are the sort of things that really drive this sense. And I think there are some things that tend to get missing as part of the LXP. There's this big sense around performance support. There's also this sense of content creation, because the content that you need, if it needs to be more nudge-orientated, is not the content that you have today. It's something that's different. And if you're trying to create a learning experience which is different, but you're using the same sort of content, it's not fundamentally that different at all. So we need to think a little bit more about how we construct that, but also how we think about how we create more social collaboration, which is one of those features. The other thing that is missing quite often is this sense of learner analytics. So what does the person do? When do they use their content most? When they're accessing, when they're interacting? And that is something that I think is going to be something that grows significantly over the next few years. But overall, there is this sense that an LXP can be covered a little by your traditional LMS system. It is partly your learning portal. It is your social collaborative stuff. It is your learner engagement. It is your performance support. But the thing that we probably need to think about adding in is this whole sense of business data and business intelligence, because it's not just about the content, it's about the motivation and social connection. So if we were really that motivated in this room, we would all have all the qualifications, which probably meant that everybody had a PhD in learning, right? Now, maybe we'll do a hands up now. Who's got a PhD in learning? Okay. Now, is that because you weren't interested? Was that because the content's not available? I'm sure the content probably is available. It's to do with the motivation. And that's something that I think, as we think about the learning experience, we have to connect with the motivation of learners as well. So, what are the most important system elements on your shopping list? The research says, from what you tell us, these are the sort of things you're looking for. Okay? But I'm not sure if that's necessarily the whole picture. It's not just about blended learning and combinations of video, user-generated, and micro-learning in a social collaborative environment. Because it's not just about individual lines, right? It's about packaging some of these things together. That's what creates some of our learning experience. But the important thing is this is not just a matter of features and functionality. Because as you probably all know from those people who've been with us looking at systems for over 10 years, you've been looking at this for a long time, actually, the list of features and functions does not tell you what the experience is. The only way you see that is through the eyes of your users, the eyes of your learners, when they're trying to solve their own problems, or they're not engaged in what they're trying to do. Okay? So, lots of features is not a great experience. It's important, but, and this is my analogy really, is this the world's best bottle opener? Potentially it is, unless you've got a cork, right? Then it doesn't work. That bottle opener doesn't work. Or if you've got a screw top and you're 80 years old and you try and take the screw off the bottle, there's no chance. So we need to think much more about the context in terms of what the learning experience needs to be. So what I'm trying to say is you don't need to start with the functionality. You need to tell the story of what the experience should have been. And I think one of the challenges that we face when we're looking at systems is that we focus so intently on, has it got this feature or functionality? What we forget to do is say, show me how that would solve Jane's problem when she's a new manager and she's got somebody on her team who hates her. How do I help her? Or if it's Bob, yeah? How do I help him when he doesn't know how to do this? and actually, he doesn't know he doesn't know how to do this. And that's our challenge about how we create the learning experience. It's more than the features. You need to have created your own story, whether it's on onboarding, whether it's about products. You need to think about the story through the eyes of the learner themselves. And that's the important thing. So I think about this as being like you've got these features, which is the experience above the line. So that's about learner engagement, it's about your touch point for the learner, it's about the social collaboration. But the thing that really drives the experience is the data underneath. If you think about your shopping experience and the best shopping experiences that you have, the person that you're buying from knows a lot about you. So when we think about the things that influence what the experience should be, that should be based on your individual preferences. Okay? Now, I'm not going to say learning styles, that's the wrong thing, but it's the things that, so what motivates you? What things excite you? Are you more video and visual? Do you like to study with others? Do you like to collaborate? Do you just like to do stuff and then get feedback? If you know that, then you can start to tailor and create a more personalized learning experience, right? And just as the same things, right, individual, that's maybe more things to do with performance, right? So if you know where somebody's performance gaps are, or where their performance opportunities are, actually, if you feed that back to them, they can make some really important self-choices about what they do. And likewise, if you know how teams are performing, then you can get teams to discuss what they can do to improve their performance. And all this data can lead back into learner engagement, it can lead back into the touch point, and it can lead back into that collaboration. So I think this is a two-way street. If we're thinking about experience, it is as much about the things that you do, but the data and the intelligence that feeds what you give people. And again, I think what we've been quite unfortunate in the learning profession to have been is that we haven't had access to some of the data that we should have. And we need to fix that as much as the experience overall, because otherwise we're not targeting the right people, the right training at the right time. And that's for their future development, or their motivation, or their belonging, whether it's personal, operational, or for their career. So, if you ask me what I think are the key things, and we've used this a few times as an analogy, so it's like the evolution of learning systems. Going back from about 1996, where there was training and certification, all the way through to next year. We need to put some more years on that. But we've moved from e-learning, delivery, blended learning. I think this is a move from being data poor to being data rich. So if you want a great learning experience, you need systems that actually are data rich in how they use the analytics to drive a personal relationship with learning and drive personal transformation. This is the aspiration, I think, around what we're looking for, potentially for around learning systems. Again, I'm not sure if we find that in the marketplace today, but I expect that to evolve over time. And there are some interesting organizations who are looking at how they use data to drive the experience. Organizations like Filtered, I'll put that out there. Organizations like Xonify, who are thinking about how they take the data and apply it in somebody's context. But this is a sense of sort of moving beyond social learning into this whole collaborative field. And it's about being intelligence rich and applying that intelligence not to you as managers or leaders of learning, but to the individual. Because you need to empower the individual to make their own choices. This is the important thing. And the problem with this, I suppose, this data view is that people are very willing. Ed Monk from the LPI talks about, there was a great piece of research from Capita that said that about 80% of your audience are happy to give you whatever information you need if it will help you provide better learning and coaching for them. Okay, so you cannot not ask for information if it'll help, if people believe that it'll improve their learning experience, right? People are willing to give that. But I think there is a challenge and a risk about the more data that we have access to, the more risk it creates of people not trusting the system, because is it just going to take a screen scrape of what I'm looking at that moment and this sort of over sense of surveillance? So I think our sense of intent around how we use data has to be very focused on the end user. It has to be about empowering the individual, not empowering managers or empowering the organization to prod the person, say you're not studying hard enough, you're not performing enough. You need to empower the individual to make those choices. Sort of nudge theory, I suppose, if you want to talk about it in that way. And there's this sense of maybe trying to encourage people to think, I love working here, as being the mantra, which means that you're trying to deliver a learning experience which appeals to people's personal agendas around their sense of purpose at work, their belonging, their recognition, their sense of autonomy, their ability to earn in the future. These are the motivators. We need to collect that as part of our learning experience. And equally, around the organization, talk the language of the business about growth. Talk about revenue, customer success, talk about reputation and efficiency, talk about performance. Because actually those are the currencies which also help people understand where they need to be aligned to. But also engage the team, right? Social experience, pull things together. But at the root of this, I think if you talked to me about what is the root of a learning experience in the future, it's the thing that we never had at school, okay? And that thing that we never had at school was really personalized learning, okay? We had a lot of sheep dipping. We had a lot of going through stuff. We had a lot of sort of passive participation. The future for me, when I think about what I'd expect and what I'd encourage you to demand from your suppliers, is this sense of how can I create an empowering personal relationship with learning with my people, whether that's stuff that's directed to my business, whether it's stuff directed to the team, or just about growing the individual themselves. I think that's really critical. And whether it's about powering people through learning cycles, so you nudge them on an ongoing basis, so they're motivated, they share, they get social, but this sense of where do we take the learner to, okay? And I think it's really important that we think not about sending the learner to study on their own, okay? The biggest reward I can give you is not saying, do you know what, you've done really well, I want to develop you, go into this room and look at this e-learning for maybe 3 or 4 hours, enjoy yourself. It's not real. What we need to do is actually create much more of a social atmosphere. And I think that's something about engaging the team in the workplace. It's about feedback and recognition. It's about all the human things, not about the content stuff. And I think for me, this is the thing. The learner experience has almost been devoid of the social connection, the interaction that says, when was the last time you got feedback? Oh, have you solicited feedback recently? Have you spoken to someone? What sort of feedback did they give you? Did they give you motivational feedback? Or did you give somebody developmental feedback? Have they followed up on that? Have you taken ownership? There is a whole sense of learning cycle about human connection, which helps develop people and create a learning culture. And I think this is really important just as a sense of the things that we want from our learning experience is not just about, oh, you work in this job, you just completed this course, this is my recommendation for your next piece of learning. That is not enough. And I think that's where we're selling ourselves a little bit short around some of these learning experience platforms. So, final thing. How do you decide what solution is right for you? Yeah. How the hell do you do that? $64 billion question, maybe. If you get this right as a provider, you're laughing, aren't you? Really hard to get right. The sad news is there are no golden bullets, right? There is no one system that can do this all for you, which is really tough. You've got your legacy systems, you've got your legacy environment. It's not easy. So I'm going to save my voice for a few seconds. So what influences you when you are thinking about buying a new solution for your learners? We'll give you 3 or 4 minutes just to discuss that on your table. Take stock of some of the things I said. Maybe think, oh, God, hell, bloody shut up. But think about this, and I'd like you to discuss this on your table. So what would influence your choice of solutions for your organization based on if you want an LXP or want something to replace your current infrastructure? What do you think? So I'll let you talk, back to your tables, discuss, and then we'll come back a little bit and hear what you've got to say. I just want to quickly, Kate's going to run around again. Sorry, Kate. So has anybody got any, so what things that influence your choice of solutions for your organization? So if anybody's managed to come up with a thought, again, if you want to volunteer, or we can just randomly pick on a table. Don't all rush at once.
Going to get picked on if you don't put your hand up.
Hands up, anyone? Right, you're all talking. Maybe you'll talk about what time lunch was. I don't know. So come on, let's go.
Nick's,
come on, guys.
Nick's put his hand up.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Nick.
Hi, David. It's really to do with the learners. It's about their cares and their feelings and understanding what they're doing day to day. It's not just about tech and technology. It's just going around and talking to people on a day-to-day basis. In fact, I see it as more research today. We should be like honeybees going around and listening to people, seeing what they're doing, and getting in touch with their cares and concerns. Does that make sense? Spot on.
Spot on. I think one of the things that's probably missing most when we get to go and to work with organizations is the level of conversation that's been had with the end user usually is zero, right? The stakeholder is not seen as the learner, it's the person who paid you money to go and buy something, which is a little bit back to front.
Got
So
another
great
brave
point.
soul put his hand up.
So Paul.
Sorry, Dave, just an observation on that last statement. Are they learners or are they actually either employees or people?
Yeah,
That
people.
We often talk about our learners. They're not learners. They're members of staff. They're employees.
Exactly.
They might be contractors. The fact is they have a need at the time that they may or may not know is a learning need.
Yep.
So if they go to a platform for many things, and one of them is learning, well, isn't that a learning experience platform? It may not be deemed as the place to go for learning, but if learning is offered to them to help them at that point of need.
Yeah,
Isn't that
definitely.
learning?
Definitely. So I think there's a strong sense of, so what are the touch points and how do you need to support people rather than learners, because they tend to not even necessarily think of it as a learning need. They think of it as something that needs to help them. And I think that's our challenge, is actually to reach out to our end people and find out from them what support they need and what element it is. Where are they in their process of learning is really important. So that's really cool. Anything else that anybody came up with? There was a lot of heated debate here. A lot of
someone
things
at the
going on
back here.
here. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I can't run fast enough in these shoes.
The only thing I was going to say is, if you focus on the learning needs, you go around, everyone learns in a different way. So if you focus on everyone's individual needs, you're never going to come to a solution, because you're focusing on one person that learns by reading things, one person that learns by doing things, but you're never going to have that solution of this suits everyone. So I guess you could go around and find the majority, but you can't then go, oh yeah, this is going to influence us the way that everyone learns, because if you go to someone that learns like by reading, say, you get this LMS that's going to show you loads and loads and loads of words that someone like me who learns by doing things isn't going to interact with it.
Yeah. But I think what you can do is start to think about how you can aggregate some of those needs together, some of those experiences. Ultimately, there will be pinch points, moments of pain, that you need to be able to support people with, and those will start to form into a pattern. And I think that is something that we probably need to focus a little bit more involved in terms of getting the people who are your end customer, ultimately end customer, involved in some of your selection processes, rather than it being the admin team, which has probably led most of the selection process of the past. But what I'll do is, I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just going to wrap up and say, so we try and think about this. So I think there is something about cost, which is in the matrix as well. So thinking about what the cost is, but more important than cost, there is this sense of, so what value are you trying to add to the individual or the organization? Most of the things around that we've used with learning technology in the past has been about creating process efficiency in learning. What we need to do is recalibrate and say what enables to give people performance efficiencies or provide a real step change in our organization overall. And these are some of the things. And I think overall, as we look at organizations working faster and faster, what we're looking at is almost an ecosystem. Because actually it takes too long to place a big bet on a big system quite often. What you need to be able to do is think about, how can I experiment, how can I learn as I go, how can I deliver fast value, is something that is probably turning a little bit of things on its head around how we approach systems. It's about continuously learning, about iterating, providing new things, learning whether they work or not. Not thinking it's going to take us 6 months to deploy, in which case 6 months already passed. We've got to think about fast value. And I think that's this sort of sense of agile ecosystem is where I start to expect some of the solutions and what you think about your learning experience to be how that evolves. But overall, it's about context, it's about outcome, it's about route, how you're going to get there, and evidence that you made some progress. And that doesn't just apply to the business, it applies to the individual. You need to think about them as individuals, and that gives you the X factor to some extent. And I think this is what you just have to make sure that when you choose something, it's based in the individual's drivers and their sense of being in the team as much as you're contributing value to the organization. If you start from this end and work back, you do find better solutions, rather than thinking what features and functionality do I need. And that's it. That's where we're up to. I'll wrap things up there. If you have any questions, I'll happily take those. I'll give you a few seconds to digest what we've gone through. Gone through a hell of a lot, right? Hopefully it's answered some of your questions about what is an LXP. Hopefully it's given you a sense of some of the features around it. You can download those and have a look at some of the detail around that. Hopefully it's giving you a sense of, actually, what am I going to demand from my suppliers as well? And who am I going to talk to back at base to find out what sort of things we need to do for our people? But if you've got any questions, I'll happily take those now, or you can come up and talk to me after on. Don't mind either way. Okay.
Did that answer the question about what an LXP is? The gentleman over here.
A little bit,
Ish.
okay, cool.
It's more a statement than a question. So I'll just disclose I'm a vendor.
Yeah, sure.
Software vendor. So I can leave the room now. Or
Yeah, fine.
It's too late now.
Too late.
the interesting thing, so we have a platform called Skillspace. So we provide part of the overall picture, but not all of it.
Yep.
But one of the things that we see is when users select our system, we always get selected. And when
Of course you do.
Of course.
And when
Naturally.
organisations select our system, we rarely get selected. And it goes to one of the sort of slides that you had up there, which is very much about sort of playing the tender game. And vendors are rewarded for having lots of functionality
Yep.
in crap systems. And the reality is we've built our system very much upon user experience, which is the reverse of that. And we choose not to do everything. We choose to do things really, really well. But it's a common problem, and you see this time and time again. Organisations that are selecting solutions just because they think they've got to have all these features, but they never recognise they're not going to use, even a half of them, and even that half they're not going to use really, really well. So, yeah, just.
Any
I
comment,
think that's a
David?
really good observation, and one of the things we frequently tell people is to lead on use case scenarios. When you're trying to select, get the supplier to show you how would you solve this problem. And it gets you disentangled from the feature list, which is useful to know, but if you're going to measure the experience, then get somebody to show the experience. And not a demo of this is how it works when I do my perfect demo, but solving your problem. That is probably the one key takeaway. And that will help you choose the right solution, could be skills-based or something else, rather than maybe just a big solution. Now, you'd have to think strategically as well, but if you act tactically, I think you'll drive much faster value and get things that you can learn from along the way.
So Gemma just had this brilliant comment on Twitter about a system being her type on paper. And I think that's a really, really great analogy, Love Island analogy for any of you watching. But I think that's a really great analogy because, like you say, there can be a list of features and you think, yes, that ticks all my boxes. But actually in context, like David says, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
So I think that's going to stay with me, that.
That was a big lesson for me. We did a big RFP about a year ago. Thank you. It was a big lesson for me. We did a big RFP about a year ago, and we made a huge list of requirements, and it was actually quite easy to tick those boxes. But in practice, when you actually got your hands on it, you found that it was totally different. And it wasn't until we did that we realised actually we've missed a big trick here by just going on what the functionality is. Because on paper, it looked brilliant.
And I think it's so important to tell your story, right? The learning experience is what you design as learning professionals in all those different contexts, whether it's performance support, whether it's about programmatic learning. That's what you have the gift to do, and choose through that lens rather than the feature lens. The feature lens will come out naturally once you're able to tell your story. So if you think the experience isn't right, it's probably because you haven't sold it or told the story around it clearly enough to yourselves. And I think that's something that you need to sort out by working closely with your end users, your people, which you call learners. If you haven't any other questions, I'm here, I can answer them
David's at the
on a
front.
one-to-one,
The
but
slides
enjoy
are online
lunch. Thank you.
as well. The slides will be up on if you're following along on Twitter. Have you got one last one?
Your slide at the beginning,
Yep.
250 or whatever,
Yeah, sure.
lots of, was all feature-based.
Yeah, exactly.
So where are you in terms of what is the way in which we can assess capability-based?
Yeah. For me, it's about take the use case scenario, present the problem to the supplier. Okay? So you have to go with, I need these people to be able to do this. This is their environment. Tell me how you'd solve that problem. I think you'll get a much better sense of capability rather than feature. And what we're trying to do with that list is say, actually, do you know what? Those functionality things, they don't tell you the whole story. So get a sense of where it is, but go and take your story to the supplier.
Context.
Cool. Context is king.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody,
Thank
for your
you.
attention.